Today, we are going to unpack the absolutely wild story of how Japan went from an unstoppable economic force to a country that basically got stuck in time for 30 years. It's an incredible journey, from a global powerhouse to a truly chilling economic warning.
Okay, so let's just dive right in, because this is the real mystery at the heart of Japan's crisis. I mean, it sounds completely backwards, right? How can a rich, modern country literally face a shortage of human beings? Well, this isn't some sci-fi scenario. It's actually happening.
Get this, in 2025 alone, it's predicted that 300 Japanese companies are going to go out of business. But here's the crazy part. It's not because they're broke. It's because they've run out of people. No one to hire, no one to take over, no one to keep the lights on. And this lack of people? It's a direct result of a lack of money in people's pockets. Just try to wrap your head around this. For an entire generation, wages have not gone up. At all. It means that many people today are actually poorer than their parents were back in 1989. We now know this period as the infamous lost decades.
But here's the thing. To really understand how Japan got into this mess, you have to go back in time. Because before the disaster came the miracle. A time when Japan wasn't a warning, it was the country everyone wanted to be.
The difference between then and now is just staggering. Back in the 80s, Japan was the world's shining star. It was growing so fast, people thought it would actually overtake the United States. Fast forward to today, and it's the most indebted country in the world, stuck in place for 30 years and facing a demographic crisis. So the question is, what on earth happened?
Well, funny enough, the story of Japan's incredible rise actually begins with its greatest rival and its former enemy, the United States. You see, Japan's economic miracle, it wasn't an accident. It was practically engineered.
Think about it. After World War II, Japan was completely destroyed, and America was looking at the New World map, at the growing threat of the Soviet Union, and they were terrified. They knew that a hungry, desperate Japan would be the perfect place for communism to take root. Because when you're starving, you don't really care about democracy. You care about your next meal.
So America made a strategic decision. They were going to turn Japan into the ultimate advertisement for capitalism. They poured in billions of dollars. They handed over advanced technology blueprints and, crucially, they gave Japan an all-access pass to sell its products in the gigantic American market. And you know what? The plan worked better than anyone could have imagined. In just a few decades, Japan rose from the ashes to become the third largest economy on the planet.
But here's where it gets interesting. The student became the master. Japan didn't just rebuild, it started to completely dominate industries that America had invented. By 1989, Japan controlled over half the entire world's market for semiconductors. Things got so heated, you had American factory workers on the news smashing Toyota cars with sledgehammers. The miracle America had built was starting to look like a monster.
So America, facing a huge economic threat from the very country it had helped build, made one single move. And that one decision would send Japan's economy spiraling out of control.
It was a deal called the Plaza Accord, and America held all the cards. See, Japan's entire miracle was built on one thing: selling cheap, high-quality stuff to Americans. So the US forced Japan to dramatically increase the value of its currency, the yen. And just like that, overnight the price of every single Japanese product in the US basically doubled. Japan's single biggest advantage, its price, was gone in a flash.
As you can imagine, Japan totally panicked. To try and save their export companies, the central bank did something drastic. They made money incredibly cheap to borrow. They slashed interest rates, hoping businesses would use that cheap money to innovate and build better products. But that's not what happened. Not at all.
So, back in the early 1980s, Japan's stock market index, the Nikkei, was sitting around 6,000 points. You know, a pretty healthy, normal number.
But by the end of 1989, after all that cheap money flooded the system, the market had skyrocketed to almost 39,000. This was pure insanity. People weren't investing in companies, they were just gambling. You had giant corporations like Toyota and Sony making more profit from playing the stock market than they did from actually selling cars and TVs.
And the madness didn't stop with stocks. It poured into real estate. And this might sound like a joke, but it was a real statistic people used at the time. The tiny plot of land under the Emperor's Palace in Tokyo was valued at more than the entire state of California. The whole thing was a massive, epic bubble built on nothing but pure speculation.
And we all know what happens to bubbles. They pop. But when Japan's bubble burst, it didn't just cause a recession. It unleashed a kind of economic disease that would infect the country for decades to come.
Realizing they had created an out-of-control monster, the Bank of Japan slammed on the brakes. Hard. They cranked interest rates way up. Suddenly, the free money party was over. The stock market imploded, real estate became worthless, and the whole house of cards just came crashing down.
The fallout was just devastating. In 1995, Japan's economy was worth about $5.5 trillion. You would expect it to grow over the next 30 years, right? Well, instead of growing, it actually shrank by $1 trillion. That kind of stagnation is almost unheard of for a major developed country.
But what Japan did next was maybe the biggest mistake of all. Instead of letting all the bankrupt, failed companies die off, the government panicked. They basically forced banks to keep lending them money, creating what economists now call zombie companies. They weren't really dead, but they definitely weren't alive either.
And this wasn't just a few bad apples. By the early 2000s, some estimates say that a staggering 30% of all companies in Japan were zombies. These companies didn't create new jobs, they didn't invent new products, they didn't invest in the future. They just sat there, like dead weight, sucking all the life and energy out of the rest of the economy.
And this zombie economy didn't just kill economic growth. It had a terrible human cost. It created what's now known as the lost generation, and it left behind some powerful lessons that are more relevant today than ever.
For a solid decade after the crash, companies just stopped hiring young people. An entire generation of graduates couldn't find stable, career-track jobs. They never built up skills, and they never had financial security. And if you can't get a good job, well, it's pretty hard to start a family. That economic disaster is the direct cause of the population collapse that we started with.
So what's the takeaway from all this? There are really three big lessons here. First, sometimes you have to let old, failing companies die so that new, innovative ones have room to grow. Second, relying too much on one single trading partner is a massive risk. And third, having a lot of people isn't enough. You need those people to be skilled, productive, and able to build a life for themselves.
And all of this leaves us with one final and kind of chilling question. The story of Japan isn't just a history lesson. It's a roadmap of economic self-destruction, and the warning signs are all there. A gigantic real estate bubble, mountains of debt, and a population crisis just over the horizon. So, when you look at the world today, which other economic giant looks like it might be heading down that exact same path?